Hello, good afternoon, students. Whether my voice is audible to you? Yes, please message me. Yes, whether I'm audible to you? Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, myself, Dr. Shweta. This is the pharmacology lecture session from 1 o'clock. So, today I'm going to take your practicals. In that, the single drug therapy and multiple drug therapy from the systems of GIT and blood. Okay. So, first we will go to the single drug therapy questions. So, as you all know, in the exams, whenever the single SDT and MDT is asked, SDT is asked for 2 marks and MDT for 3 marks. So, you have to write all the questions that is of SDT and MDT in this prescription format only. So, as shown here in this slide, the model prescription format, which includes first the doctor's details, then patient details, that is superscription, subscription, inscription, and transcription. The middle is the name of the drugs, whatever which are given in that condition. Then it's the name should be written in capital letters, its dose, and its dosage form, whether it is a capsule or tablet or injection. Then any instructions to be given, whether to take before meals, after meals, etc. Its total duration and total quantity. That should include in this part. And lastly, the doctor's signature along with registration number. This is the model prescription format. All the conditions, henceforth I am going to tell you, you have to write in the model prescription format only. So coming to the SDT, first one, that is vomiting. Vomiting, again, it is a condition, or you can say emesis also. This vomiting is said to be, the pathophysiology behind this is it occurs because of the stimulation of vomiting center that is present in the middle oblongata, that is chemoreceptor trigger zone, that is CTZ, or nucleus of Tractus solitarius. Okay, so in this figure you are going to see this is the CTZ area in the area of prostrum of medulla oblongata, and this is NTS area. These two are the vomiting centers in our body. So any stimulus coming to these areas may cause emesis or vomiting. So there are different receptors which are present in the CTZ area. These receptors are like dopamine, that is D2 receptor, and serotonin, that is 5-HT3 receptors, opioid receptors, etc. Any stimulus going to these receptors, they get stimulated and then vomiting occurs. So this is the basic pathophysiology you should know behind vomiting. So the drugs which are given in these conditions, first is, these are called as antiemetic drugs, of course, and among them first is metoclopramide. So this group of drug, it is included as a prokinetic drug, but its mechanism of action as antiemetic is different and prokinetic effect is different. So first we will see how it acts as antiemetic. So this metoclopramide drug acts on the dopamine receptors in the CTZ area, that is D2 receptor. It acts as antagonist of these receptors, and hence any stimulus coming to this CTZ area is masked, or you can say it prevents or blocks the stimulus, emetic stimulus coming to the chemoreceptor trigger zone. So this is the metoclopramide mechanism of action. It is given in the dose of 10 milligram, 1 tablet, TDS for 3 to 5 days. But you have to take it before food. Or the other drug you can write in this condition is domperidone. Again, this domperidone is also belonging to the category which acts as dopamine receptor antagonist centrally. Okay, it also acts on dopamine receptors in GI tract, where it blocks the peripheral impulses, emetic impulses coming from the GIT. Okay, so again its dose you have to write 10 milligram. You have to take one tablet TDS 3 to 5 days before food. And then lastly, other anti-emetic drug you can also add, or any other option. It is like ondansetron. Ondansetron, it belongs to the group of 5-HT3 antagonist. Okay, it is a serotonin antagonist. So this is ondansetron, but its dose is 8 milligram BD before food. All these drugs, they are given in the orally tablet forms only. But when there is serious or severe vomiting, you can give injectable forms also. This was regarding vomiting. So whenever vomiting comes as STD, you have to write any one drug among this with its correct dose and duration and instructions. Second question is chemotherapy or radiation-induced vomiting. Again, the mechanism of vomiting behind this is also same. Here only the chemotherapeutic drugs which are given in the cancerous patients or any radiation that is given, it induces vomiting. Okay, so in that cases only one drug is said to be highly effective, that is ondansetron, which belongs to 5-HT3 antagonist group. Okay, so it is given injectable form only at the dose of 8 milligram IV slowly for 15 to 30 minutes. But these drugs you have to give before chemotherapy starts. Before you are giving the chemotherapy drugs, first you have to give this anti-emetic drug, that is ondansetron, in injectable form or in tablet form. The second drug, you can also add metoclopramide 0.3 to 2 milligram per kg, which is also given slowly IV or intramuscular. Then these ondansetron, it is said to be the most effective drug for chemotherapy induced nausea vomiting or any other type of vomiting, that is post-operative nausea vomiting, etc. Then coming to the third case, that is diarrhea. Diarrhea, it can be invasive diarrhea or simple non-invasive diarrhea. Okay, it can be infective one, infective that may be due to various organisms like gram-positive, gram-negative, or due to viral etiology also. So here the basic pathology you should have the anti-diarrheal drugs. It includes first antimicrobial drugs, then anti-secretory and anti-motility drugs. So in single drug therapy, you have to write at least one drug that helps to immediately decrease the stool frequency. So this group of drugs are included as anti-motility drugs. For example, is first one is the loperamide. So what is this loperamide? It is an anti-motility drug. Why it is called so? Because it is a opioid receptor agonist, that is mu opioid receptor agonist. So how it acts? The mu receptors which are present on the mu opioid receptors present in the GIT. So it acts as an agonist there, and as the opioids are having a constipating action, that means they decrease the motility of the GI tract. So in this way, these drugs help to decrease the stool frequency. So you have to give this drug in the dose of 2 milligram. The 2 milligram tablets are available in the market in the name of Imodium. Okay, so you have to give one tablet BD for 3 days. If the stool frequency is more, then you can give 4 milligram tablet after each stool. Okay, in this way you can give up to only 10 milligram per day. This is the dose of loperamide. Okay, then other drug you can add for just simple diarrhea is Reseka-Dotril. It belongs to the anti-secretory type of antidiarrheal drug. It is anti-secretory. Now, how it acts? The delta receptors present on the delta opioid receptors present on the GI tract, they are responsible for secretions in the gastrointestinal lumen. Okay, so these delta receptors, they require activation by some enkephalins. So what this Reseka-Dotril it does, it prevents degradation of enkephalins, and in turn this causes decreased stimulation of delta receptors on GIT, and hence the secretion is decreased. So the stool frequency decreases. So this is the mechanism of action of Reseka-Dotril. Now students, if during this lecture session, if anybody wants to ask me any type of question, you just message me here. Okay. And the dose of this drug is resveratrol drug is about 100 milligram twice a day for 3 days. You have to give this. Then other drug you can add as antidiarrheal drug is diphenoxylate hydrochloride. Again, this is a mu receptor opioid receptor agonist, or you can call this at a synthetic opioid agonist. It is given in the dose of 2.5 milligram TDS for 3 days. So this was regarding SDT for diarrhea. Coming to traveler's diarrhea, it is always infective etiology caused due to E. coli, that is enterotoxigenic E. coli, or Shigella, etc. So here you have to add antimicrobial drug. So in traveler's diarrhea, you can give antimicrobials like fluoroquinolones, that is ciprofloxacin or fluoxacin, or tetracyclines like doxycycline, and some cotrimoxazole like drugs. So here we are writing tablet ciprofloxacin, which is given in the dose of 500 milligram twice a day for 5 to 7 days. It is to control the loose motions. And again, you can add additional to this are the anti-motility drugs or anti-secretory drugs. So this is the treatment of traveler's diarrhea. So while writing single drug therapy, you have to write tablet antimicrobial drug, along with it some anti-motility drug. Coming to the part of gastric ulcer. Okay. So I'm seeing here that some students are joining very late. So it's not good, because you people will miss some important parts in this SDT, and how can I repeat it again? So please, till then, and if anybody wants me to ask any question, I want to stop for 5 minutes, please. If anybody is having any question, you please ask me. Okay, can anybody tell me what are the drugs given for peptic ulcer? Tell me some drugs given for peptic ulcer. Yes, answer me. Yes, right. PPI inhibitors. Then other than that, H2 blockers. Then yes, H2 blockers, PPI inhibitors. Antacids. Prostaglandin. Anti-H. pylori. Okay. Again, proton pump inhibitors. What are ulcer protectives? Which one are the ulcer protectives? CBS, that is colloidal bismuth sulfate. Okay. Then other sucralfate. Okay. Then what is alginate? What is alginate? Anybody can tell what is alginate? That is used for GERD. Very good. Any other antiemetic drugs? Any other antiemetic drugs other than metoclopramide and this domperidone? What are prokinetic drugs? Okay, hyoscine, right? Anybody Anybody can tell me what drugs are used for morning sickness? What is morning sickness? Drugs for morning sickness? Dicyclomine? No. Morning sickness? No, it is, that is motion sickness. Doxylamine, right. So it is doxylamine that is used for morning sickness. And for motion sickness, which drug is used for motion sickness? Scopolamine, then hyoscine. Okay, the drug dosage also you should know, right? Okay. Then which other drugs are given in diarrhea? Along with antimicrobials, antimotility, antisecretory, other antidiarrheal drugs. What are probiotics? Whether probiotics can be given in diarrhea? Yeah, right, probiotics. Then oh, okay, we'll move further. So I was telling you regarding, yes, everyone can hear me. I'm audible to all of you. Yes or no, please message me. Okay, so let's go for further question that is on gastric ulcer. If a single drug therapy is asked on gastric ulcer, so first you should know the basic pathology for what is a peptic ulcer or what is gastric ulcer. So peptic ulcer, these conditions they arise because it can be a gastric ulcer or duodenal ulcer. Gastric ulcer pathology is that here the acid secretion in the GI mucosa lumen is normal or low, while in duodenal ulcer it is always high or sometimes normal. Okay, so this is the two basic pathology behind gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcer. In gastric ulcer cases, what happens? The acid secretion is normal, but the defensive mechanism in the gastric mucosa it is defective. So here the major aim you have to be like to decrease the acid secretion along with to increase the mucosal defense system. So this is regarding gastric ulcer and duodenal ulcer. This basic thing you should know first. The second thing, how the acid secretion is stimulated basically. So there are three stimulus for gastric acid secretion. First one is the histamine that is released from the enterochromaffin cells, okay, which acts on the histamine H2 receptors of the parietal gastric parietal cell. And second stimulus is the gastrin, which is released from G cells, which acts on the CCK2 receptors on the parietal cell and in turn causes acid secretion. And third stimulus is acetylcholine, which is released from the enteric nervous system. Here it acts on muscarinic receptors first on the enterochromaffin cells and in turn increases the histamine release and thus the acid secretion is increased. These are the three basic stimulus for increasing acid secretion in the GI mucosa. So what type of drugs that are used for decreasing the acid secretion? First group is H2 blockers. H2 blockers means they block the H2 receptors on the parietal cells. So these are histamine blockers. So what they do, they act on all the three stimulus. That is, it acts on decreasing the histamine release also, it acts on gastrin and also on the acetylcholine. So these all the three stimulus are blocked by these H2 receptors, H2 receptor blockers. Hence they are used here in the gastric ulcer cases. Okay. So first one is H2 blocker that we are going to write here is ranitidine. Its dose, how much dose you have to give. So its ulcer healing dose is 300 milligram. 150 milligram is just the maintenance dose. But here for ulcer cases, you have to write 300 milligram dose only. It is given once a day at the bedtime. For the duration is important here. For ulcer cases, always duration is important. Here it is given, H2 blockers are given for 8 to 12 weeks. And other drugs that you can add for gastric ulcer are proton pump inhibitors. So as you have seen in this figure, that proton pump, that is hydrogen potassium ATPase enzyme pump that is present, it is causing release of H plus ions that is required for the formation of acid. They are released from this pump. So the proton pump inhibitors indirectly, they decrease the acid secretion. So these proton pump inhibitors are pantoprazole, then omeprazole, rabeprazole. So what happens here? The gastric ulcer cases, H2 blockers, what they do, they heal gastric ulcer up to 75% at the end of 8 to 12 weeks. While the proton pump inhibitors, what they do, they heal gastric ulcer cases up to 4 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks duration. So they are having more healing capacity, ulcer healing capacity. So proton pump inhibitors are mainly preferred, but H2 blockers can also be given here. So the doses here are important. Pantoprazole is given always in 20 to 40 milligram dose for 8 to 12 weeks, while the other drugs, that is omeprazole, rabeprazole, they are given for only 4 to 8 weeks. Okay, so the dose is 20 milligram. Now, what we will say of this omeprazole? Omeprazole is having a peculiarity that it inhibits the enzyme, that is hydrogen potassium ATPase enzyme, irreversibly. So what happens? The maximum acid secretion duration is reached by this omeprazole drug. Okay. Then what else I am going to tell you is these proton pump inhibitors, they bring about healing of ulcer up to 4 to 8 weeks, while the H2 blockers, they heal ulcers in 8 to 12 weeks. So this is the duration for these drugs that you should remember and write while writing the single drug therapy. Then other drugs you can add for gastric ulcer are sucralfate. What is sucralfate? It is ulcer protective, of course. How it acts? It is aluminum salt of sucrose. Okay, so it is given 1 gram orally in empty stomach. It is given empty stomach and before bedtime. So it is said to act as a barrier. It forms a cover over the ulcer wall and thus protects its contact with the acid. Gastric mucosa contact with acid, and hence it is said to be the ulcer protector. Similarly, the colloidal bismuth subcitrate. It is again a ulcer protective, but its dose is 120 milligram. It is given half an hour before any measurements and also at bedtime. So this dose, its duration or instructions that have to be given, that you should write it properly. Then coming to these ulcer protectives, they also cause delaying of the gastric emptying. Okay. Then second condition is duodenal ulcer. Again, for duodenal ulcer, you are writing the same drugs, that is H2 blockers. The dose is same, duration is same, and all the proton pump inhibitors, that is pantoprazole, omeprazole, rabeprazole, again the duration is same. So, but in duodenal ulcer cases, what happened? The H2 blockers, they bring about a healing of these duodenal ulcer up to 90% in 8 to 12 weeks. While proton pump inhibitors, they heal the duodenal ulcer in 4 weeks only. So they are having more healing capacity. Then other are ulcer protectives that you have to write here again, sucralfate and colloidal bismuth subcitrate. Then the next condition is flatulence. What is flatulence? It is the sensation of gases in the GI tract. All the patients, they complain that they are having the sensation of gases, or that is the flatulence. And in these cases, what we are giving, the drugs they are called as digestion drugs, because of the incomplete digestion, sometimes the froth is formed in the GI tract, and that leads to the gases or the sensation of gases. So you have to give here the digestion drugs. So this is a simethicone. Simethicone is considered to be a silicon polymer, which is it is a viscous form liquid, it is a viscous material that brings about, what it does, it decreases the surface tension of the froth that is formed in the GI tract, and because of that, what happens, the sensation is decreased. So this is a simethicone, but its dose is 500 milligram, which is given once a day after meals or at bedtime. So this dose of simethicone is higher for flatulence. In case of dyspepsia also, we are giving this simethicone drug, but it is dose is very less there. It's the dose there is just 150 milligram, but its higher dose is given for flatulence. Okay, then this was regarding simethicone. Then coming to the other condition, that is constipation. When constipation is asked to you as a single drug therapy, where different drugs. What is constipation? First of all, it is incomplete sensation, incomplete evacuation of bowel contents, or there is a formation of hard stools, etc. Everything comes under constipation. So different drugs are given here. So these drugs are called as laxatives or purgatives. So just tell me, what are laxatives first? What are laxatives? Answer me, what are laxatives? Laxatives makes the stools semi-solid. No, soft stools, right? Laxatives are the agents which brings about softening of the stools, right? And what are the purgatives then? What are purgatives? Fast acting in the sense of what? Means what they do as they are acting fast. Watery stools they will cause because the stools, they are not right. It is having immediate action. The stools are not formed properly, but they are just evacuated along with water. Evaporate water means evacuates water. Okay. So that are called as purgatives. So the classification for this you have learned in the lectures also, the water laxatives and water purgatives. So this bisacodyl, where it is of which group? It is a, yes, bisacodyl is, what is bisacodyl? Stimulant purgative, right? So it is a group of stimulant purgative. How it acts? When it enters the intestine, it gets activated by the mechanism that is called as deacetylation. Okay, so this bisacodyl, it gets activated here. Then it causes irritation of colonic mucosa. because of which there is increased water secretion in the GI tract. So the stools, they become more bulky because of the water content, and that stimulates the GI tract and causes evacuation of the bowel contents out. So this is the mechanism of stimulant purgatives. It is called a stimulant because it irritates, and that's why it becomes bulky, and then the feces, they are evacuated out. That is the stimulant purgative. Okay, they just form semi-formed stools. They cause release of semi-formed stools. They are not proper forming the stools. They don't wait for the stools that to get properly formed. The semi-formed stools are also evacuated by these drugs. So when you are giving this bisacodyl, motions can occur within 6 to 8 hours. But for a formed stool, it takes more duration. That is 18 to 20 hours it takes for a formed stool to come out. But within 6 to 8 hours, these stimulant purgatives, they will give out semi-formed stools. Then other drug which you can add here is liquid paraffin. Liquid paraffin, it acts as a stool softener only. Okay. How it acts? It acts as a lubricant property. So it is given 15 ml HS, that is at bedtime only. Or you can give isafgula. What is isafgula? It is a bulk forming agent. Okay, then how these bulk forming agent they act? Isafgula, it is having some property to absorb water. It forms a gelatinous mass because of which the GI tract becomes bulky, and again the stimulus, this causes increased peristaltic movement and the stools, they come out. So this is the bulk forming agent. So isafgula, it is given in the sachet form, which you have to take in water. Its weight is 30 gram sachet, dissolve in 250 ml of water at bedtime. This is the dose and proper instructions how the isafgula is taken. You have to give instructions like take plenty of water along with fibrous diet. Okay, this is the treatment of constipation. Then if you are getting chronic constipation question, then here you have to add some osmotic purgatives also. So example is syrup lactulose. Lactulose is a osmotic purgative. Again, it is also having the same action, that it brings about more water secretion in the GI tract, because of which the peristaltic movement increases. So serum lactulose, its dose is just 10 gram per 15 ml and given only at bedtime. So in chronic constipation cases, you have to you can give bisacodyl along with liquid paraffin, or you can give bulk forming agents or these osmotic purgatives. Okay. Simple acute constipation, you can treat with just these stimulant purgatives or bulk forming agents. But for chronic constipation, you can add osmotic purgatives also. Then this was the classification of laxatives and purgatives. This is stimulant purgative, bulk forming agents, osmotic purgatives, etc. Then next question can be constipation with hemorrhoids. In such cases, you cannot give purgatives. Okay. Mostly your liquid paraffin is preferred because it acts as a lubricant. It will help to decrease the stimulation of the hemorrhoids and decrease bleeding in these patients. So only syrup liquid paraffin you have to give 50 ml HS, or you can give some bulk forming agents like isafgula. Then in pregnant women also, purgatives are not given. Only you can give is pregnancy with constipation. You have to write with serum liquid paraffin, syrup liquid paraffin along with isafgula, plenty of water and fibrous diet. This was regarding the single drug therapy from GI tract. Now we are going to see the single drug therapy questions from blood system, that is hematinics. So what are hematinics? These are the drugs or the agents that brings about hematopoiesis or blood formation in your body. So there are some conditions like anemia, where you have to give these hematinics. So anemia can be iron deficiency anemia. This iron deficiency anemia can occur again because of improper absorption of iron from the body, or it can be due to increased blood loss, or there are various reasons. So any reason may be there, you have to supplement iron, the mineral, for this iron deficiency anemia. So iron, basically how it is absorbed? Iron is basically absorbed in the ferrous salt form only. It is not absorbed in ferric form. Okay, just 1 minute. Hello. सर मी प्रॅक्टिकल म्हणजे इथे लेक्चर घेते एंडोस्कोपी युनिट मध्ये. हो सर, माझं चालू आहे. हो हो. Sorry for the disturbance, students. Okay. So what we were saying that in iron deficiency anemia, you have to give oral iron or parenteral iron. It depends upon the severity of the anemia. So oral iron, it is given in the available in various salts, that is ferrous salt along with its complex like ferrous fumarate, ferrous sulfate, ferrous ascorbate, then ferrous citrate, etc. So while prescribing, you have to see how much amount of elemental iron is present in that salt. So mostly ferrous sulfate was used previously more commonly because it is the cheapest form, but its elemental iron is very less. So nowadays ferrous fumarate and ferrous ascorbate or ferrous citrate, they are used because its elemental iron, it's believed to be up to 33%. So its dose is here 325 milligram. Ferrous fumarate given 325 milligram, one tablet once a day for 6 months, and you have to give iron tablets empty stomach. What happens in empty stomachs? There may be some discomfort, GI discomfort may occur. So now sometimes these iron tablets can be taken with meals also. Okay, so the duration of this iron tablet, it depends on the severity of anemia. It takes about 1 to 3 months for symptomatic relief, okay, of this iron deficiency anemia, and to replenish the stores, it requires 3 to 5 months. So that's why we are giving for 6 months. Okay, if you are adding the ferrous sulfate salt, then its dosage is 200 milligram, one tablet taken for 3 months. This was regarding iron deficiency anemia. Then coming to megaloblastic anemia. Megaloblastic anemia, again, it is a condition that was caused due to deficiency of some maturation factors like vitamin B12 and folic acid. Okay. So this megaloblastic anemia, vitamin B12, which is again, this can be due to malabsorption of vitamin B12 in the body or deficiency intake. Then it can be due to various GI tract abnormalities like inflammatory bowel disease or any other reason. So again, you have to give this vitamin B12 and folic acid supplementations. B12 is available in 2 to 3 forms like cyanocobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, and methylcobalamin. So this methylcobalamin, it is a methyl coenzyme. It is a coenzyme of vitamin B12, most commonly given. But in some countries, hydroxycobalamin is given. That is because it is having more protein binding capacity. So it remains in the body for more time. So that's why in some countries like in British areas, they are using hydroxycobalamin injection 1000 milligram, 1000 microgram intramuscularly, which is given for weeks, certain weeks, for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, etc., depending upon the deficiency. This vitamin B12, they are given in only injectable format. Methylcobalamin is given in the dosage of 1500 microgram. Okay, that is intramuscularly. Then it is given for once a day and for 2 weeks. Then you have to add the tablet folic acid. Folic acid is available in the tablets of 5 to 10 milligram, which you have to take once a day for daily for 4 weeks again. Then you have to add here in megaloblastic anemia, iron deficiency can also be seen when you start these vitamin B12 and folic acid supplementation. It may that iron deficiency is unmasked. Hence, iron preparations are also added nowadays in megaloblastic anemia. So you can add here iron salt like ferrous sulfate or ferrous fumarate 200 milligram 1 tablet given empty stomach. Okay, so this was regarding megaloblastic anemia. The requirement of folic acid, daily requirement of folic acid, daily requirement of vitamin B12, these are the some common questions that are asked in your Viva that I just wanted to highlight here. Again, what happened? The next question is on anticoagulants. Okay, anticoagulants, these are the drugs which decreases the coagulation capacity in the blood. Okay, so anticoagulant classification, again, anybody can tell me which are the anticoagulant drugs? Anticoagulant drugs, examples. Yes, tell me students, tell me some anticoagulant drugs. Whether it is covered in your theory lectures? Yes or no? Yeah, warfarin, it belongs to parenteral factor 10 inhibitor, bivalirudin. What is bivalirudin? Sodium citrate. Direct thrombin inhibitors. Example of direct thrombin inhibitors. Okay, right, you are right. Okay, so the anticoagulant drugs where you can use them. It is the first condition is treatment of DVT or pulmonary embolism. So what is DVT? That is deep vein thrombosis. So in these cases, you have to give anticoagulant drug as the first line. So your injectable low molecular weight heparin or fondaparinux, it is given in the dose of 5 to 10 milligram, and all these anticoagulants, they are given subcutaneous route and OD, and then repeated 4 hourly or 6 hourly. So your low molecular weight heparin, what are the examples of low molecular weight heparin? Just tell me examples of low molecular weight heparin. Yes. Enoxaparin, reviparin, very good. So it is enoxaparin, dalteparin, reviparin, etc. These are the low molecular weight heparins that are used nowadays. And fondaparinux, these all both the drugs, they belong to the category of direct thrombin inhibitors, and thus they affect the these clotting factors in the blood and brings about anticoagulant action. So this was treatment of DVT or pulmonary embolism. Then coming to the, if you are giving these anticoagulants in the overdose form, if it is a overdose form, then what you will give? You have to give injection vitamin K, that is its antidote, give in the dose of 10 milligram intramuscularly, and then 5 milligram 4 hourly. Repeat it 5 milligram 4 hourly according to the dose of the anticoagulant that is given. Okay. So that is adjusted according to the anticoagulant dose. So this is the treatment of overdose of anticoagulants. Then coming to the next condition is hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are bleeding piles. Okay. So here sclerosing agents are given. So what are these sclerosing agents? Example is sodium tetradecyl sulfate. It is given in the injectable form, locally injected in the dose of 0.5 to 2 ml. Okay, this is the treatment of hemorrhoids. Then menorrhagia. Menorrhagia is a condition of excessive bleeding, menstrual bleeding that occurs in most of the women. So here you can describe trinaxamic acid. What is trinaxamic acid? It is antifibrinolytic drug. So what these antifibrinolytic drugs do? Yes, prevent excessive bleeding by just decreasing the clot dissolution. Okay, hence they are known as antifibrinolytic. So this is trinaxamic acid given 500 milligram TDs. This was a treatment of menorrhagia. Then coming to the next system, that is lipids, hypolipidemic drugs, which are used in the conditions that is hyperlipidemia. That means more amount of lipids and lipoproteins they are released in blood because of increased cholesterol synthesis or any other pathology. So in these conditions, hyperlipidemia occurs. That can be primary or secondary hyperlipidemia. Then which are the lipoproteins that you know? It can be LDL, that is low density lipoproteins, VLDL, that is very low density lipoproteins, then HDL, that is high density, that is HDL should be increased, and others are triglycerides and chylomicrons. Okay, so these are the lipoproteins that you know. So hyperlipidemia condition, what happens? More amount of lipoproteins are released. So here there are different hypolipidemic drugs which act by various mechanisms. So firstly prefer are HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors. So what is this HMG-CoA reductase enzyme? This enzyme is required for cholesterol synthesis. Okay. Hence, if we target this enzyme, the cholesterol synthesis decreases. And yes, it is a rate limiting step in cholesterol synthesis. So when we are targeting this enzyme that gives a maximum benefit, it is said that the HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, that is statins, they are said to have a maximum effect on LDL levels up to 50 to 60%. Hence, they are firstly preferred. Examples of these HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors are atorvastatin, rosuvastatin, pitavastatin, etc. There are also others are lovastatin, then pravastatin, simvastatin, but they are low efficacy statins. We are here preferring higher efficacy statins. Higher efficacy statins means atorvastatin, rosuvastatin, and pitavastatin. So among these also, again, these atorvastatin, rosu, and pitava, they are having longer half-life as compared to other statins. Half-life is longer. For atorvastatin, it is more mainly 12 to 18 hours. Rosuvastatin, it is 18 to 24 hours. And for pitavastatin, it is less, that is 12 hours. Okay. Then atorvastatin half-life is more. Then what we see that doses of atorvastatin and rosuvastatin, they are different. Dose of atorva is 10 to 40 milligram per day, while for rosuva it is 5 to 20 milligram per day. And for pitava, it is 1 to 4 milligram per day only. Okay. So these are the standard doses. Among this, you have to choose according to the patient. So here we are giving atorvastatin in the dose of 10 milligram, one tablet, once a day, only at bedtime. As statins, they are said to have maximum intensity of their action in the midnight, or you can say at the night time only. Hence, they are given at bedtime. So statins you have to give at bedtime only. Again, pitavastatin is given in the dose of 2 milligram OD at bedtime. Okay. So one more property of what is rosuvastatin is that it causes increase in some degree of increase in HDL levels also, about 10 to 15% sometimes. So this is the property of rosuvastatin. So again, if SVT is asked for hyperlipidemia, you can add any one drug among this statins. Okay. Coming to the second condition, that is hypertriglyceridemia. What happens here? There are more levels of triglycerides in the blood. Okay. So the most effective drugs for triglycerides are these fibrates. Fibrates are lipoprotein lipase activators. Okay. So what is this lipoprotein lipase enzyme? This enzyme, it is required for degradation of LDL and VLDL in the body. So what these fibrates they do, they activate this enzyme and causes more degradation of LDL and in turn decrease in the triglyceride synthesis also. Hence, we have seen that fibrates, they are more having more action on triglyceride level. They decrease the triglyceride level by 20 to 50%. Okay, and what happened? This fenofibrate, again, gemfibrozil, that is a fibrate given in the dose of 600 milligram, one tablet BD taken 30 minutes before meals. Okay, while this fenofibrate is a fibrate group of drug which is given in the dose of 165 milligram with meals, and this is the only fibrate along with which statin can be given. With other fibrates, we cannot give statins. Okay, why? Because they are affecting, fibrates are affecting the metabolism of statins. So we cannot give them with other fibrates, but only we can give statins with fenofibrate. Okay, so you can add rosuvastatin with this fenofibrate, 10 milligram one tablet at bedtime. This is the treatment of hypertriglyceridemia. Then coming to the multiple drug therapy. What are the different questions that can come under this multiple drug therapy? First one is peptic ulcer. Again, as you have taught earlier also, in multiple drug therapy cases, you have to write some primary measures also. It can be a non-pharmacological treatment. First that you have to write, then you have to come to the pharmacological treatment, elaborate it properly. That is known as multiple drug. Okay. So here primary measures what you can take for peptic ulcer, you have to avoid spicy and oily food, avoid stress, smoking, alcohol, tobacco, etc. Then lifestyle modification like exercise, weight reduction, etc. You have to avoid some drugs like NSAID and steroids and take adequate sleep. These are the primary measures that you should tell to the patient of a peptic ulcer. Then what are the drug treatment? Now coming to the drug treatment for ulcer, again as previously as we have seen, you have to write first the proton pump inhibitors. Anyone you can write, capsule omeprazole or pantoprazole or lansoprazole, anyone. Then you have to add second group of drug, that is H2 blockers. Example, tablet ranitidine, ulcer healing doses, 300 milligram taken at bedtime for 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 12 weeks, anything. Then you have to add other group of drugs, that is ulcer protectives like sucralfate, given 1 gram BD before meals for 4 to 6 weeks. Then lastly, syrup antacids. Here antacids are again added. Antacids are like, these are non-systemic antacids, that is magnesium hydroxide and aluminum hydroxide. You have to take 2 teaspoons 3 to 4 times a day after meals for 6 to 8 weeks. You have to give these after meals. Syrup antacid. Okay. Then if in peptic ulcer cases, sometimes the H. pylori organisms, that is a gram-negative organism, it is also said to be the positive organism for peptic ulcer. So you have to give anti-H. pylori regimens also here. So in peptic ulcer cases, there are some anti-H. pylori regimens that are added in your books newly. So these regimen are, it is called as 1 week regimen or 2 week regimen. Okay. 2 week or 1 week. Previously it was triple drug regimen and quadruple drug therapy. It was like that. Now it is given in the form of 1 week and 2 week. The 4 group of drugs that are added in the regimen, it includes proton pump inhibitor, then antimicrobials like amoxicillin, clarithromycin, and metronidazole or tinidazole. These are the 3 to 4 drugs that are added in the regimen, and how the drugs they have to be taken, it is given here. For any peptic ulcer cases, you have to start first 1 week regimen. If it is not getting cured by that, 85% cure occurs in 1 week regimen only, but sometimes some people may require 2 week regimen also. So first 1 week regimen includes proton pump inhibitor, then amoxicillin in the dose of 1 gram BD, and clarithromycin 500 milligram BD. You can add metronidazole also. Then second, if you are giving esomeprazole, then you have to add clarithromycin and metronidazole. If you are giving lansoprazole, then you have to add amoxicillin and metronidazole. In this way, this is the complete regimen of anti-H. pylori eradication. For 2 weeks, twice you have to give twice daily drugs. Here you are going only once daily, twice daily only. Then the drugs are omeprazole, lansoprazole, amoxicillin, clarithromycin, this metronidazole. Okay, this is the anti-H. pylori regimens that you have to write in peptic ulcer also. Second multiple drug therapy question is severe diarrhea. As you have seen for first the antidiarrheal drugs, now you have to add some non-pharmacological measures also to write this multiple drug therapy answer. So first you have to see that the patient is having any what is his BP, heart rate, urine output, any signs of dehydration is there in the clinical examination or not. Then according to the dehydration sign, you have to add IV fluids or oral fluids, whatever. But as it is a severe diarrhea, you have to add here IV fluids only, which may include ringer lactate, normal saline. Okay, then ORS is also added as and when required. Then other antimicrobial, that is drugs, that is it can be norfloxacin, metronidazole, etc., which is given. Norfloxacin dose is 400 milligram, BD taken for 7 days, and metronidazole it is given also in the dose of 400 milligram, TDS for 7 days. Then other anti-motility drugs that you have to add here are loperamide, okay, or diphenoxylate, anyone you can add. Then dicyclomine is added for spasms, abdominal cramps that come in the diarrhea. Then ondansetron, it is again acting as a antiemetic and increase the gastric emptying cases if there is nausea and vomiting. And pantoprazole, it is taken before meal as proton pump inhibitor. So this is the treatment of severe diarrhea. Then coming to third question, that is gastroesophageal reflux disease, that is GERD. It is known as GERD, G-E-R-D. So some primary measures again you have to add here, that is dietary and lifestyle modification. You have to take the night dinner earlier, before 7 o'clock. Then you have to raise the head end of the bed while you are sleeping. Then again weight reduction, avoiding the precipitating factors. These are the principal measures. Others are again avoid oily and spicy food, stress, smoking, alcohol, etc. For the symptoms, GERD symptoms, what are the GERD symptoms? Patients are complaining that they are having sensation of reflux of the gastric contents again back after taking meal. That is the main complaint of the patient. So here what happens, the basic pathology is in the lower esophageal tone. That tone is decreased. Okay, so along with the acid secretion disorder, the esophageal tone is also seen. Basically, it is a gastric motility disorder. This GERD, it is a gastric motility disorder. So, firstly, you have to add proton pump inhibitors, H2 blockers, and some ulcer protectives, and the prokinetic drugs. So, prokinetic here is metoclopramide. So this metoclopramide, what it does, it acts on the lower esophageal area, and its prokinetic action is believed to be its action on 5-HT4 receptors that are present here. That is its prokinetic effect. What happens here? It acts on the 5-HT4 receptors on GIT and causes the release of excitatory neurotransmitters. Okay, and that causes increase in the gastric emptying. This is the basic prokinetic effect that you should know of metoclopramide, or in the GERD cases. It acts on 5-HT4 receptors. This is the treatment of GERD. Here you have to add metoclopramide as prokinetic, then alginate, which protects the, it forms a layer over the esophageal opening and thus prevents its reflux. And then you have to add antacids also here. Last question is regarding multiple drug therapy of anemia in pregnancy. If anemia in pregnancy occurs, then what you will give? So you have to take full nutritious diet. Add first primary measures that you should take nutritious diet containing iron like jaggery, green leafy vegetables, etc. Then add tablet folic acid 5 mg OD for 3 months, and the iron supplementation is added in the form of capsule ferrous fumarate 300 mg for 3 months. But you have to take this with meals. Then if there is severe anemia in pregnancy, then you can give injectable iron, that is iron dextran. What is this iron dextran? Again, it is a higher molecule that is formed in these cases, and it is given injectable form by proper technique that is known as a Z technique. It is given intramuscularly by Z technique only and for severe anemia. So intramuscularly 2 ml daily. Other salt that can be given by this intramuscular injection is iron sucrose. That is known as ferrous sucrose also, 100 milligram in 100 ml, 0.9% saline slowly over 30 minutes. And if still the anemia is not getting covered, then you can add blood transfusions of compatible blood group if needed. So this was regarding anemia in pregnancy. So regarding this iron dextran and iron injectable iron for molecules, so the correct dosage you should know along with the techniques that is given. It is given by Z technique only. It is given 2 ml daily intramuscularly, or you can give 5 ml on each side like that, etc. Then, thank you. Thank you, students. This was regarding the single drug therapy and multiple drug therapy that comes in from these systems, and for which you people should know the answers. Anybody want to ask any type of question?